Hello, this is Eva Spencer, and you are listening to Empath Awakening, an empath healing audiobook provided to you by United Audiobooks. I hope you enjoy my audiobook. Now let us begin.
Introduction. The most powerful gift you can bring to any relationship is your capacity to remain open, yet unaffected. Ram Dass. When I first recognized my own empathic nature, I felt equal parts blessed and burdened. Perhaps you're nodding along, intimately familiar with that paradox. The ability to sense what others feel, to absorb their joy, pain, anxiety, and hope, as if they were your own, is both an extraordinary gift and at times an overwhelming weight to carry. I created this audiobook because I've walked the path you're on. I've experienced the exhaustion that comes from absorbing the emotional energy of a crowded room. I've felt the confusion of not knowing which feelings were mine and which belonged to someone else. I've canceled plans because I simply couldn't face another day of energetic bombardment. And most importantly, I've discovered that there is another way to live, a way that honors your sensitive nature while protecting your peace. Think of Maria, a therapist who came to me utterly depleted. I love my work, but by Thursday each week, I'm completely drained. I can barely function in my personal life, she confided. Or consider James, who described family gatherings as emotional tsunamis that left him needing days to recover. Then there's Layla, who avoided deep relationships because she couldn't bear the intensity of feeling everything her partner felt. These stories might sound familiar because they represent the universal struggle of the empath, the challenge of navigating a world that often feels too loud, too bright, and too emotionally charged, the journey toward empathic balance. What I've discovered and what I share in this audiobook is that empathic abilities don't have to come at the cost of your well-being. You don't need to choose between meaningful connection and personal peace. In fact, the most profound connections become possible when you learn to honor your sensitivity while establishing healthy boundaries. This audiobook isn't about dulling your empathic gifts or shutting yourself away from the world. It's about transformation, turning what might feel like a vulnerability into your greatest strength. Through practical tools, daily rituals, and gentle self-care practices, you'll learn to create a life where your empathic nature enhances rather than depletes you. The roadmap I've created draws from ancient wisdom traditions, modern psychology, and the lived experiences of thousands of empaths who have successfully navigated this journey. You'll discover how to recognize when you're absorbing others' emotions and swiftly return to the center. Create energetic boundaries that protect without isolating. Develop discernment about which emotions require your attention and which you can compassionately release. Establish daily rituals that cleanse your energy field and restore your natural balance. Harness your intuitive gifts with confidence and clarity. Throughout this journey, remember that your sensitivity isn't a flaw to be fixed. It's a profound capacity that, when channeled wisely, allows you to experience life's richness in ways others can barely imagine. From overwhelm to empowerment. I still remember the moment everything changed for me. After years of feeling at the mercy of everyone else's emotional states, I was sitting in meditation when I suddenly perceived my empathic nature not as a porous boundary that let everything in, but as a magnificent instrument that I could learn to play with skill and intention. That shift in perspective marked the beginning of my transformation. From overwhelmed empath to empowered intuitive. The practices that facilitated that shift are the same ones I'll share with you in the chapters ahead. I'm deeply grateful to the teachers who helped me along this path, particularly my mentor Elena, who first showed me that boundaries and love aren't contradictory, but complementary. I'm thankful for the wisdom keepers across cultures who have perceived practices specifically designed for those with sensitive nervous systems. And I'm indebted to every empath who has bravely shared their struggles and triumphs with me, enriching my understanding of our shared journey. Most of all, I'm grateful to you for choosing this audiobook and committing to your own well-being. Your decision to explore this path isn't selfish, it's necessary. The world needs empaths who know how to shine brightly without burning out. Whether you've identified as an empath for years or just beginning to understand your sensitivity. Whether you're struggling with emotional overwhelm or simply seeking to refine your empathic abilities, you'll find guidance tailored to meet you exactly where you are. As we move forward together, I invite you to approach this journey with curiosity and self-compassion. The practices we'll explore aren't about achieving perfection. They're about creating a sustainable relationship with your beautiful, sensitive nature. Some days you'll implement them flawlessly, and other days you'll forget entirely. And both experiences are perfectly all right. What matters is your willingness to begin, to move forward, to take one small step toward the peaceful, empowered life that awaits when you learn to honor your empathic gifts while protecting your precious energy. Are you ready? Let's embark on this journey together. Reclaim your peace without dimming your sensitivity. Have you ever felt the weight of emotions that weren't entirely your own? I remember that confusion well, wondering why I felt so drained after helping others or spending time in crowded spaces. It took me years to understand that what felt like emotional chaos was actually untrained empathy, an intuitive gift waiting to be directed rather than endured. Your sensitivity isn't a flaw to be fixed. It's a sophisticated form of perception that allows you to connect deeply, heal profoundly, and sense truth beneath the surface. But to thrive as an empath, you must learn how your mind, energy, and emotions truly interact. Once you do, the overwhelm begins to dissolve, replaced by a quiet steadiness that feels like coming home to yourself. To help you understand the deeper mechanics of your empathic sensitivity, I've partnered with Books for Growth to offer you the free What is Your Psychological Archetype quiz. It's a unique blend of psychology and energy awareness designed to illuminate how your thoughts, emotions, and intuition interact beneath the surface. The insights you'll receive will help you see how your internal patterns influence your relationships and sense of balance, giving you both clarity and confidence in your empathic nature. Your sensitivity was never meant to weigh you down. It was meant to guide you. Turn your empathy into your greatest source of strength and peace. Visit quiz.booksforgrowth.com to get started. That's quiz.books4growth.com. Again, quiz.booksforgrowth.com. Chapter 1. Intuitive Power. Transforming Sensitivity into Strength. When your greatest vulnerability becomes your superpower. In a world that often values logic over feeling, those of us who experience emotions deeply find ourselves at a crossroads. You've likely felt it. That moment when you walk into a room and instantly absorb the emotional climate, sensing tensions no one has verbalized or joy no one has announced. This heightened awareness, this emotional resonance with others, isn't a weakness to overcome. It's an untapped wellspring of intuitive knowledge waiting to be channeled. Many empaths spend years believing their sensitivity is something to hide or diminish. We've been told we're too sensitive or that we take things too personally. These messages lead us to view our natural empathic abilities as burdens rather than gifts. But what if this perspective has been backward all along? What if the very quality that makes you feel vulnerable in a harsh world is actually your greatest strength? This chapter marks the beginning of a transformative journey, one where we'll explore how to redefine sensitivity not as a source of exhaustion, but as a form of intuitive knowledge. Together, we'll discover how emotional attunement creates a direct pathway to understanding others at a level most people can't access. This understanding isn't mystical or mysterious. It's a natural extension of your empathic nature, a concrete skill that can be refined and directed with intention. The path from overwhelm to empowerment isn't about building walls or becoming less sensitive. Instead, it's about learning to work with your natural abilities in new ways. Throughout this audiobook, we'll build a comprehensive toolkit that helps you establish healthy, energetic boundaries, develop your intuition with confidence, and create daily rituals that protect your well-being. These tools form the foundation of what I call the Empath Empowerment Roadmap, a clear path toward emotional resilience, without sacrificing the depth of connection that makes life meaningful. Next, we'll first explore how empathy functions as a form of intuitive knowledge. You'll learn to identify the subtle connections between what you feel and what you intuitively understand about others. This awareness creates the cornerstone for transforming passive sensitivity into active insight. We'll then work on reframing how you perceive your sensitivity, shifting from a narrative of vulnerability to one of unique personal strength. This shift isn't merely psychological. It creates tangible changes in how you navigate your daily life and interactions. Finally, we'll explore practical methods to employ your sensitivity proactively. Rather than absorbing emotions as they come, you'll learn to engage with them intentionally, using your empathic abilities to enhance your effectiveness in relationships, work, and personal growth. These skills build upon each other, creating a foundation for the chapters that follow on boundary setting, energy protection, intuitive development, and daily self-care rituals. The journey from emotional exhaustion to empowered self-mastery takes time, typically 3 to 6 months of consistent practice with the tools provided here. But unlike approaches that ask you to become someone you're not, this path honors who you already are. Your sensitivity isn't something to fix or overcome. It's a powerful gift to cultivate. By the end of this audiobook, you'll not only understand how to prevent the overwhelming fatigue of absorbing others' emotions, but also how to transform your empathic nature into your greatest source of strength, connection, and personal peace. Let's begin by exploring the untapped potential of your intuitive power, the remarkable ability that has been within you all along, waiting to be recognized not as a burden, but as your most authentic form of wisdom. The silent language of pain. Maria sat in the garden, watching bees hover over lavender blooms. The morning light spilled across her notebook, illuminating half-written thoughts she could not finish. 3 houses down, Mr. Abernathy argued with his wife. Maria felt the tension press against her skin, though she could not hear their words. The weight of their anger sank into her chest and tightened there. "This is not my emotion," she whispered to herself, pressing her palm against her sternum. She had spent years trying to distinguish between what belonged to her and what she absorbed from others. The boundary remained tissue-thin. Yesterday, her therapist had suggested a new approach. What if this sensitivity isn't a weakness, but a kind of knowledge? Dr. Lin had leaned forward, her eyes clear and direct. What if you've been fighting against your greatest strength? Maria had nodded politely, unconvinced. For 32 years, she'd experienced her emotional permeability as a liability. At work, she took extended lunch breaks to escape the undercurrents of office politics. She avoided crowded trains, busy restaurants, and friends going through divorces. Her social circle had shrunk to those with the emotional equivalent of good hygiene. The notebook contained her attempts to reframe. Maria traced the edge of the page with her fingertip, remembering how her grandmother had shown her the subtle changes in a garden before a storm. "The birds know," Abuela had said. "The insects know. They feel it coming without anyone telling them." Perhaps this was similar, a different kind of weather system, invisible but real. She glanced toward Mr. Abernathy's house. The argument had peaked and fallen. She felt it subside like a wave drawing back from shore. A child rode past on a bicycle, trailing joy behind him like a banner. Maria felt it catch in her chest, a bright bubble expanding. She inhaled deeply, allowing herself to experience the sensation without resistance. If she could feel others' pain with such accuracy, could she not also channel their joy, their courage, their resilience? The thought opened something in her. She picked up her pen and wrote, "Today I choose to see clearly rather than protect myself from seeing. Today I name what I know rather than doubt it." The wind shifted, bringing the scent of cut grass from the park. Maria stood, tucking her notebook under her arm. She would walk to the community center where she volunteered. Yesterday, a new refugee family had arrived, and the intake coordinator had struggled to understand their needs. Perhaps Maria could help bridge that gap, sensing what remained unspoken in their gestures and expressions. Perhaps this was not about protecting herself from the world, but offering the world what only she could see. What might happen if those who felt too much stopped apologizing for their nature and instead recognize the wisdom hidden within their vulnerability. The nature of empathic intuition. Empathy runs deeper than simple emotional understanding. At its core, it functions as a sophisticated form of intuitive knowledge, a direct perception that bypasses conscious reasoning. When you sense someone's sadness without them saying a word, or feel tension in a room before anyone speaks, your empathic ability is accessing information through channels beyond the 5 conventional senses. This intuitive understanding operates through subtle cues that our conscious mind often misses. Your brain constantly processes micro-expressions, slight changes in vocal tone, shifts in body language, and even energetic fluctuations that surround others. As an empath, your neurological system is particularly attuned to these signals. Studies in neuroscience have identified specialized mirror neurons that activate when we observe others' emotions, essentially creating an internal simulation of their experience. Imagine your empathic ability as a highly sensitive antenna, constantly receiving signals from the emotional broadcasts around you. While others might catch only the loudest emotional stations, your reception picks up even faint frequencies, providing you with a richer emotional landscape. This explains why you might find yourself inexplicably affected by someone's unspoken feelings. Your intuitive system is decoding signals others don't consciously register. The connection between emotional attunement and intuitive knowledge isn't mystical, it's biological. Research shows that empaths often demonstrate heightened activity in areas of the brain associated with emotional processing, particularly the anterior insula and anterior cingulate cortex. These neurological differences create what scientists call embodied cognition, where you literally feel others' emotional states within your own body. This physical experience of others' emotions provides data that informs your intuitive assessments. Many empaths report knowing things about others without being told, sensing underlying emotions beneath social masks, or having insights into situations that later prove accurate. These aren't random guesses, but the result of your brain processing complex emotional data. Your intuitive knowledge stems from this heightened perception, connecting patterns and concluding before your conscious mind articulates them. Think of your empathic intuition as reading between the lines of human interaction. While others hear only the words, you perceive the tone, the hesitation, the silence between the sentences, and the subtle variations in pitch that provide context and deeper meaning. This capacity makes you exceptionally skilled at understanding human behavior in all its complexity. Though the information overload can sometimes feel overwhelming, empathic intuition is not a mystical sixth sense, but a heightened form of emotional intelligence that provides valuable insights through subconscious processing of complex social and emotional data, transforming perception from vulnerability to strength. For many empaths, sensitivity has long been framed as a weakness to overcome. In a world that often values stoicism and emotional detachment, your natural attunement to feelings, both yours and others, can seem like a liability. Perhaps you've been told you're too sensitive or need to toughen up. These messages, repeated over time, can lead to a negative self-concept where you view your empathic nature as a flaw rather than a gift. The truth is that sensitivity, properly understood and managed, represents a powerful advantage in human connection. Your ability to detect emotional nuances gives you access to information others miss entirely. Consider how this translates to practical situations. You can identify when someone feels uncomfortable in a conversation before they say anything. You sense when a colleague is struggling with personal issues affecting their work. You recognize when a loved one needs support, even when they insist they're fine. This emotional intelligence provides valuable data for navigating social interactions effectively. Research in psychology increasingly recognizes high sensitivity as a distinct trait present in approximately 20% of the population. Dr. Elaine Aron, a pioneer in this field, describes highly sensitive people as having sensory processing sensitivity, a trait characterized by deeper processing of sensory information and higher emotional reactivity. This trait appears across numerous species, suggesting it serves an evolutionary purpose rather than representing a defect. The journey from viewing sensitivity as vulnerability to recognizing it as strength begins with reframing. Consider how this ability would be described if it were a superpower in a film. The capacity to sense emotional undercurrents, understand unspoken needs, and connect deeply with others would be portrayed as an extraordinary gift. The same capacity that allows you to be deeply affected by suffering also enables profound compassion, empathy, and meaningful connection. Like a master sommelier whose refined palate detects subtle flavor notes others miss, your emotional sensitivity provides discernment that enhances your understanding of human experience. While others might perceive only the basic emotional flavors in an interaction, you taste the complex notes, the hints of past experiences, the underlying currents of unspoken feelings. This metaphor helps illustrate how what seems like oversensitivity is actually sophisticated discernment. The reframing process requires both intellectual understanding and experiential reinforcement. Begin noticing how your sensitivity has positively impacted your life and relationships. Perhaps it's guided you toward meaningful work, helped you form deep connections, or allowed you to offer timely support to someone in need. Document these instances to create evidence countering the negative narrative about sensitivity. Building a positive self-concept as an empath also means recognizing the valuable contributions your sensitivity makes to communities. Empaths often serve as emotional bridges, mediators, healers, and counselors, formal or informal, in their social circles. Your ability to understand multiple perspectives and deeply consider others' feelings contributes to more compassionate and cohesive group dynamics. In a world often divided by the inability to understand different viewpoints, your empathic capacity represents an essential social skill. The power of perception transformation lies in how it changes your relationship with your experiences. When you view sensitivity as weakness, each emotional reaction becomes evidence of your flaw. When you recognize sensitivity as strength, these same reactions become valuable data informing your understanding. Nothing about your experience has changed, only your interpretation of it. Yet this shift fundamentally alters how you engage with your empathic nature. Embracing your sensitivity doesn't mean ignoring its challenges. Rather, it means approaching these challenges from a position of strength rather than deficiency. Instead of asking, "How can I be less sensitive?" you begin asking, "How can I best manage and utilize this valuable capacity?" This reframing moves you from avoidance to engagement, from shame to empowerment, from hiding your true nature to strategically applying it. What if the sensitivity you've been trying to overcome is actually your greatest gift, waiting to be fully recognized and strategically employed? Practical applications of empathic intuition. Transforming sensitivity into strength requires more than conceptual understanding. It demands practical application in daily life. The first step involves developing conscious awareness of your empathic responses. When you enter a room and feel suddenly anxious, pause to consider whether this emotion originates from within you or might be something you're picking up from others. This distinction, learning to separate your feelings from those you absorb, forms the foundation of utilizing empathic intuition effectively. Once you've identified empathic information, you can intentionally use it to enhance communication. For example, when sensing tension in a conversation, instead of becoming overwhelmed by the emotion, you might gently acknowledge it. "I'm noticing some concern about this decision. Would it help to discuss any reservations?" This approach transforms your sensitivity from a source of discomfort into a tool for creating psychological safety and deeper understanding. Developing a consistent practice of emotional grounding prepares you to use empathic abilities proactively rather than reactively. Think of your sensitivity like a sophisticated instrument that requires proper calibration. Daily rituals of centering, whether through meditation, physical movement, or connection with nature, stabilize your emotional baseline. From this grounded state, you can intentionally extend your empathic awareness when needed. Rather than being constantly bombarded by emotions, your empathic intuition proves especially valuable in decision-making contexts. Many empaths report feeling whether a situation or person aligns with their well-being before logical analysis confirms this assessment. By honoring these intuitive signals rather than dismissing them, you access valuable guidance. For instance, when considering job opportunities, your empathic sense of the workplace culture might provide crucial information about whether the environment will support your flourishing. Consider your empathic ability as a finely tuned navigation system for social interactions. While others might navigate solely by the map of explicit communication, you have access to real-time emotional traffic updates that reveal invisible obstacles and alternative routes. This ability allows you to adjust your approach based on subtleties others miss, knowing when to give someone space, when support is needed, or when a different approach might be more effective. Practical application also involves strategic self-disclosure about your empathic nature. In professional settings, this might mean explaining your perceptiveness as emotional intelligence rather than labeling yourself an empath. You might say, "I've noticed some hesitation about the proposal. Would it be helpful to address concerns before moving forward?" This framing presents your sensitivity as a professional strength rather than a personal peculiarity. The most empowered empaths learn to toggle between immersion and observation in emotional experiences. Like a swimmer who can both dive deep and rise to the surface for perspective, you can develop the capacity to engage deeply with emotions while maintaining enough separation to use the information effectively. This skill develops through practice, intentionally engaging your empathic perception in controlled situations, then stepping back to process what you've learned. Your empathic sensitivity represents not just an intuitive form of knowledge acquisition, but a transformative strength that, when consciously applied, enhances your confidence, deepens your connections, and improves your effectiveness in every interaction, tuning what once felt like vulnerability into your most valuable asset. Cultivating empathic resilience. Building resilience as an empath requires understanding that your sensitivity isn't simply something to manage. It's a sophisticated perceptual system to develop and refine. Like any powerful tool, your empathic ability becomes more valuable as you learn to use it with precision and purpose. This development process involves both protecting your sensitivity and strengthening your capacity to process the information it provides. The journey toward empathic resilience begins with establishing clear personal boundaries. These boundaries aren't walls that block your sensitivity, but rather filters that allow you to consciously choose how and when to engage your empathic perception. Practice saying phrases like, "I need to step back from this situation," or "I can listen for 15 minutes, but then I need some time to process," when you feel emotionally overwhelmed. These statements honor both your capacity for deep connection and your need for self-protection. One powerful technique for building empathic resilience is the practice of conscious differentiation between emotions. When you feel overwhelmed by feelings, pause and ask yourself, "Is this emotion mine, or am I absorbing it from someone else?" This simple question creates a moment of separation that helps you maintain perspective. With practice, you'll develop the ability to recognize the distinct signature of your own emotional patterns versus those you're picking up from others. Consider creating a daily energy management ritual that supports your empathic nature. This might include morning practices that establish your emotional baseline, midday check-ins to release accumulated emotional residue, and evening routines that help you process and release the day's emotional experiences. These rituals need not be time-consuming. Even 5 minutes of conscious breathing or visualization can significantly support your emotional regulation. The development of empathic strength parallels physical training in many ways. Just as athletes progressively challenge their muscles to grow stronger, you can gradually expand your capacity to process emotional information without becoming overwhelmed. Begin by intentionally engaging your empathic perception in controlled, time-limited situations. Then gradually extend these periods as your emotional stamina increases. This progressive approach builds resilience without risking emotional burnout. The path to empathic mastery lies in transforming your relationship with sensitivity, seeing it not as vulnerability to overcome, but as an intuitive intelligence to develop. Your empathic perception becomes a powerful tool for navigating human connection with confidence and purpose, enhancing both your well-being and your impact on others. The intuitive strength transformation. As we've explored throughout this chapter, your sensitivity is far more than a burden. It's an extraordinary gift that offers unique insights into the human experience. By recognizing your empathic abilities as a form of intuitive knowledge, you've begun the essential journey of transformation that reframes sensitivity as strength. The connection between your emotional attunement and intuitive perceptions forms the foundation of your empathic power. When you embrace this connection, you unlock a deeper understanding of yourself and others that many spend lifetimes seeking. Your ability to perceive emotional undercurrents isn't a weakness. It's a sophisticated form of intelligence that deserves to be honored and developed. Reframing your sensitivity as strength doesn't happen overnight, but the shift in perspective creates profound change. When you view your empathic nature as a valuable asset rather than a liability, you transform not only how you see yourself, but how you move through the world. The practical methods we've explored show how to employ your sensitivity proactively, enhancing your interpersonal effectiveness while protecting your emotional well-being. This balance allows you to share your gifts without depletion, the true mark of empathic mastery. Now, let's bring these insights together with a practical process to continue your transformation. The Sensitivity Alchemy Process. Goal: transform your empathic sensitivity from a source of overwhelm into a foundation of personal strength and intuitive wisdom. Step 1. Acknowledge and redefine. 2 to 3 days. Create a quiet space free from distractions where you can reflect deeply. In a journal, list situations where your sensitivity felt overwhelming. Beside each entry, note the valuable insights or understanding that came from the experience. What did your sensitivity reveal that others might have missed? This simple practice begins shifting your focus from burden to benefit. Step 2. Craft your empowerment affirmations. 1 day. Identify 3 affirmations that genuinely resonate with your experience of sensitivity as strength. Examples might include, "My sensitivity reveals truths others cannot see," or "I trust the wisdom of my empathic intuition." Choose statements that feel authentic rather than forced. Write these affirmations on note cards and place them where you'll see them daily. Step 3. Mirror practice. 5 to 7 minutes daily for 3 weeks. Each morning, stand before a mirror and speak your affirmations while making eye contact with yourself. Notice any resistance that arises and breathe through it. This practice reinforces neural pathways that connect your sensitivity with positive self-perception rather than vulnerability. Step 4. Responsive awareness training. Ongoing. Begin observing your emotional responses during everyday interactions. When you feel strongly connected to others' emotions, pause briefly. Take a breath and consciously choose your response rather than reacting automatically. Ask yourself, how can my sensitivity serve this moment? This practice builds the muscle of empathic discernment. Step 5. Active listening integration. Practice in at least 3 conversations weekly. During conversations, focus completely on understanding before responding. Notice the difference between what's being said and what's being felt. Reflect what you perceive. It seems like you're feeling. This practice grounds your intuitive insights in real connection while building confidence in your perceptions. Step 6. Visualization and embodiment. 10 minutes, 3 times weekly. Find a comfortable position and close your eyes. Visualize your sensitivity as a warm, glowing light that surrounds and protects you, while also allowing you to perceive clearly. See this light guiding your interactions, transforming vulnerability into clarity and insight. Feel the shift in your body as you embrace this new perspective. Step 7. Create your transformation vision. 1 afternoon. Gather magazines, photos, art supplies, or digital images that represent your journey from sensitivity to strength. Create a vision board that visually depicts your transformation, using images and words that symbolize empowerment, connection, and intuition. Place this somewhere visible as a daily reminder of your evolving relationship with your sensitivity. Evaluation. After 1 month, review your journal entries. Notice changes in how you perceive and respond to your sensitivity. Are you experiencing more moments of empowerment and fewer moments of overwhelm? Adjust your practice based on what you discover. Remember that transformation is a process, not a destination. Some days you'll feel stronger in your sensitivity than others, and that's perfectly natural. What matters is the overall trajectory, moving toward a life where your empathic gifts enrich rather than deplete you. As you continue through this audiobook, you'll build on this foundation, learning to establish healthy boundaries, develop sophisticated intuitive tools, and create nurturing self-care rituals. Each chapter offers another piece of the puzzle, gradually revealing the full picture of what it means to live as an empowered empath. Your sensitivity has always been your strength. You're simply learning to recognize and harness what was always there. This is just the beginning of your awakening, and the journey ahead holds transformative possibilities that will reshape not only how you experience sensitivity, but also how you experience your life. Awaken your energy and stay emotionally aligned. If you're anything like me, you felt the intensity of emotions that seem to pass through you like waves. Beautiful, powerful, and sometimes completely overwhelming. As empaths, we don't just feel emotions, we absorb them. It can be hard to tell where others end and we begin. I know how exhausting that can feel when your heart is wide open, but unprotected. What I've learned on my own journey is that sensitivity is not something to fix, it's something to honor. Your emotions are messengers of deep wisdom. When you learn to read them with clarity instead of carrying them as burdens, you begin to live from a place of calm strength. True empowerment comes when you stay compassionate and connected while remaining anchored in your own light. To help you nurture this inner balance, I partnered with Books for Growth to create a free ebook titled Emotional Intelligence in Social Settings. It's a gentle, practical guide to understanding the emotional energy around you, while keeping your vibration clear and grounded. If you're ready to embrace your empathy as a sacred strength, this resource will guide you toward peace, connection, and emotional alignment, one calm breath at a time. Visit emotions.booksforgrowth.com to get started. That's emotions.books4growth.com. Again, emotions.booksforgrowth.com.
I hope you are enjoying my audiobook so far. It would be a pleasure if you could let me know how you are feeling about this audiobook in the comment section below. We would greatly appreciate it if you could also like this video and subscribe to United Audiobooks to have access to more best-selling audiobooks in the future. Also, if you are interested in getting more free audiobooks, please click the first link in the description below. Now let us carry on with the next chapter.
Chapter 2, Emotional Mastery, Beyond Innate Skill. The Unexpected Truth, Why Your Emotional Sensitivity Doesn't Equal Emotional Mastery. There's a persistent myth that haunts many empaths on their journey of self-discovery, the belief that heightened emotional sensitivity automatically translates to skilled emotional management. If you've ever found yourself overwhelmed by emotions that weren't technically your own, yet wondered why you couldn't simply handle it better, you're not alone. The disconnect between feeling deeply and managing effectively represents one of the most misunderstood aspects of the empathic experience. Many of us come to realize our empathic nature after years of being told we're too sensitive, or that we take things too personally. We discover that our ability to absorb the emotional states of others isn't a weakness, but rather a profound form of perception. Yet this revelation, while validating, often leads to a new and equally challenging question. If I'm so attuned to emotions, why do I struggle to manage them? The capacity to sense emotions and the skill to process them effectively are entirely different abilities. Think of it this way. Having exceptional hearing doesn't automatically make someone a skilled musician. Similarly, your natural empathic receptivity doesn't inherently grant you the tools to channel, interpret, or regulate the complex emotional information you receive. This distinction is crucial to understanding the empathic journey and represents the foundation for our exploration in this chapter. The misconception that empaths naturally excel at emotional management can actually hinder our growth. When we believe we should instinctively know how to handle our emotional experiences, we may feel inadequate or defective when we struggle. This creates a cycle of shame that further complicates our relationship with our sensitivity. Breaking free from this cycle begins with acknowledging that emotional mastery requires deliberate development. It's a learned skill, not an innate trait of empathic people. Throughout the following sections, we'll challenge the myths that have limited your understanding of your empathic nature. We'll examine why the very qualities that make you receptive to others' emotions, your openness, your compassion, your responsiveness, can sometimes work against your ability to maintain emotional equilibrium. You'll discover that far from being a contradiction, this paradox is a common experience among empaths who haven't yet developed targeted strategies for emotional regulation. Most importantly, we'll introduce specific practices designed to transform your sensitivity from a sometimes overwhelming burden into a managed and even advantageous aspect of your life. From mindfulness techniques that help you distinguish between your emotions and those you've absorbed from others, to boundary-setting strategies that protect your energetic field. These skills represent the bridge between sensitivity and mastery. You'll learn that with structured development and consistent practice, the very quality that may have once felt like your greatest vulnerability can become your greatest strength. The journey from sensitivity to mastery isn't about changing who you are. It's about developing the skills to honor your empathic nature while thriving in a world that often doesn't understand it. As we move forward together, remember that struggling with emotional overwhelm doesn't mean you're failing as an empath. Rather, it signals that you're ready to evolve beyond simply experiencing emotions to consciously working with them. This evolution represents not just relief from suffering, but the opportunity to access deeper wisdom, connection, and purpose through your unique empathic gifts. The quiet burden of those who feel too much. Sarah walked along the lakeshore as the sun sank low, painting the water in shades of orange and gold. The pebbles crunched beneath her feet. She had left her phone at home. Today had been too much. The hospital, the patient's pain seeping into her bones, until she couldn't tell where their suffering ended and hers began. "You're such a natural at this," her supervisor had told her after she'd calmed the frightened child in the cancer ward. "You just know what people need." But Sarah knew better. She wasn't a natural. She was drowning. The wind picked up, sending ripples across the lake's surface. Sarah pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders, remembering her therapist's words from that morning. "Your empathy is not a superpower that comes with an instruction manual," Dr. Ellis had said. "It's like having perfect pitch, but never learning to read music. The sensitivity is there, but the skills to manage it need development." Sarah had nodded, thinking of all the time she'd absorbed others' emotions until she felt hollowed out. A vessel filled with feelings that weren't hers to carry. Huron stood motionless at the water's edge, patient and focused. Sarah envied its stillness, its ability to wait without becoming lost in the currents around it. Last week, she'd started practicing the mindfulness techniques Dr. Ellis recommended. 5 minutes of breathing each morning, creating mental boundaries when patients shared their traumas. Small steps. She remembered her college roommate Diane, another empath who'd burned out by their junior year, switching from psychology to accounting because numbers don't have feelings. Sarah didn't want that fate. The memory of yesterday's breakdown in the staff bathroom surfaced. 3 terminal diagnoses delivered in one shift. She had excused herself, locked the door, and slid down against the wall, her shoulders heaving with silent sobs. Not her pain, but it had become hers. No one had taught her how to build the necessary walls, how to care deeply without drowning in the depths. Sarah picked up a flat stone and skipped it across the water. 1, 2, 3, 4 jumps before it sank. Progress, like the new boundary she'd set today when she told her brother she couldn't solve his marriage problems. It had felt wrong at first, selfish even. But then came relief, space to breathe. "You're not responsible for fixing everyone," Dr. Ellis had reminded her. "Being sensitive to others' needs doesn't mean you must fulfill them all." The lake stretched before her, vast and calm despite the wind that disturbed its surface. Perhaps that was the goal, Not to stop feeling the wind, but to develop enough depth that the surface ripples wouldn't disturb her core. Sarah turned toward home as dusk settled over the water. Tomorrow, she would try the new emotion regulation technique Dr. Ellis had taught her. Small steps, a skill to learn, not an innate talent to master instantly. A pair of ducks cut through the darkening water, leaving V-shaped wakes behind them. Sarah watched them, her breath slowing to match their rhythm. Perhaps there was strength in this sensitivity of hers, if she could learn to channel it rather than be channeled by it. The thought brought a tentative peace as she turned from the lake and headed up the path toward home. What would happen if empaths like Sarah stopped believing they should naturally excel at managing the emotions they so keenly perceive, and instead embraced the deliberate practice of emotional regulation, as athletes embrace training, with discipline, patience, and the expectation of growth over time? Unmasking empath mythology. Many people believe that empaths are natural emotional masters, intuitively capable of managing both their own feelings and those of others. This couldn't be further from the truth. Being an empath means you have heightened sensitivity to emotions, but this sensitivity doesn't automatically come with an instruction manual. It's like having exceptional hearing, but never being taught how to interpret different sounds or protect yourself from overwhelming noise. The sensitivity itself isn't the skill, it's merely the starting point. Think of emotional sensitivity as a powerful but untamed river flowing through your consciousness. Without proper channels and boundaries, this river can flood, causing damage and exhaustion. Your empathic nature might allow you to feel the emotional currents more intensely, but without training, these currents can quickly become overwhelming, leaving you drained rather than empowered. Research in neuroscience has consistently shown that emotional regulation is a developed skill, not an innate trait. Studies of the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for emotional management, reveal that this area develops through practice and experience. For empaths, this development is even more crucial because the volume of emotional data you process is significantly higher than average. Your brain needs specific training to handle this increased emotional input efficiently, just as an athlete's body needs conditioning to perform at higher levels. The confusion stems partly from society's tendency to conflate sensitivity with skill. We observe empaths accurately, detecting others' emotions, and assume this awareness translates to mastery. This assumption creates unrealistic expectations that empaths should naturally know how to process these emotions without becoming overwhelmed. It's a dangerous myth that leaves many empaths feeling inadequate when they struggle with emotional boundaries or experience compassion fatigue. Many empaths have internalized this misconception, believing there must be something wrong with them when they feel emotionally hijacked. I should be better at this, they think, adding layers of shame to an already challenging experience. This self-judgment only compounds the difficulty, creating a cycle where emotional overwhelm leads to self-criticism, which leads to more emotional distress. The journey toward emotional mastery for empaths isn't about discovering abilities you should already have. It's about developing skills you need to acquire. Just as a person with naturally keen eyesight still needs training to become a professional photographer, your emotional sensitivity requires refinement through deliberate practice and learned techniques. The good news is that your heightened awareness gives you excellent raw material to work with, provided you invest in developing the necessary skills. Emotional mastery for empaths is not an innate gift, but a learnable skill set that transforms sensitivity from a vulnerability into a strength. Essential skills for the empathic toolkit. Mindfulness stands as perhaps the most fundamental skill for empaths to develop. At its core, mindfulness involves paying attention to the present moment without judgment. For empaths, this practice creates crucial space between feeling an emotion and becoming consumed by it. When you notice yourself absorbing someone else's anxiety, mindfulness allows you to observe this process with awareness, rather than automatically taking on their emotional state as your own. The practice begins simply. Spend 5 minutes daily focusing on your breath. When emotional sensations arise, whether yours or you've absorbed from others, notice them without attempting to change or judge them. Label what you're experiencing. This is anxiety, or I'm feeling someone else's disappointment. This labeling creates cognitive distance that helps prevent emotional hijacking. Have you ever watched waves crash against a shoreline? The ocean remains in a constant motion, with waves rising and falling in endless succession. Your emotional experience as an empath mirrors this natural phenomenon. Emotions come and go, sometimes gentle, sometimes overwhelming, but with mindfulness, you learn to be the shore rather than the wave. You remain present and stable while allowing emotions to wash over you without sweeping you away. Emotional regulation techniques form the second essential component of an empath's skill set. These practices help you modulate the intensity of emotional experiences, allowing you to remain functional even when surrounded by strong feelings. One effective approach is the emotional thermometer technique, where you rate the intensity of what you're feeling on a scale from 1 to 10. This simple quantification helps activate the rational brain, reducing the overwhelming nature of intense emotions. Another powerful regulation technique involves conscious breathing patterns. When you notice emotional intensity building, try the 4-7-8 method. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7, and exhale for 8. This extended exhalation activates the parasympathetic nervous system, naturally calming your psychological response to emotional stimuli. Research has shown that controlled breathing patterns can lower cortisol levels and reduce the impact of stress on your system, especially important for empaths who regularly absorb stressful emotions from their environment. Boundary setting represents a critical skill that many empaths struggle to develop. The ability to differentiate between your emotions and those of others requires practice and intention. Start by checking in with yourself before entering emotionally charged situations. How are you feeling? Establishing this baseline helps you identify when you're picking up external emotions later on. Then practice visualizing a permeable shield around yourself, one that allows you to connect with others while filtering the intensity of their emotions. For many empaths, cognitive reframing offers another valuable tool for emotional management. This involves consciously shifting your perspective on emotional experiences. When overwhelmed by others' feelings, remind yourself, I can understand their emotions without taking responsibility for them. This mental shift helps maintain emotional connection while preventing unhealthy absorption that leads to burnout. Physical practices also play a crucial role in an empath's emotional regulation toolkit. Regular exercise helps discharge accumulated emotional energy, while grounding techniques like walking barefoot outdoors can help restore equilibrium after intense emotional exposure. Your physical body serves as the container for all the emotions you experience, and caring for it properly increases your capacity to process emotional information without becoming overwhelmed. These skills require consistent practice to become second nature. Many empaths expect immediate mastery and become discouraged when they still experience emotional flooding despite their efforts. Remember that you're rewiring neural pathways that may have been operating on autopilot for years. Progress often follows a 2 steps forward, 1 step back pattern, with gradual improvement over time rather than instant transformation. Integration happens through daily practice in real-world situations. Start with lower-stakes emotional environments before testing your skills in more challenging contexts. A family dinner might be easier to navigate than a hospital visit or an emotional support session with a friend in crisis. As you build confidence in your ability to maintain boundaries and regulate your emotional experience, you can gradually expand into more demanding situations. What if your sensitivity isn't a curse to manage, but a gift to master? One that requires training like any valuable skill. Transforming sensitivity into strength. Emotional sensitivity, when properly channeled, becomes a remarkable asset rather than a limitation. Empaths who develop structured emotional skills find that their sensitivity provides unique advantages in both personal and professional contexts. Their ability to detect subtle emotional nuances allows for deeper connections, more effective communication, and enhanced decision-making, but only when supported by proper training and boundaries. Consider the transformation that occurs when empaths learn to distinguish between observation and absorption. Untrained empaths often unconsciously absorb the emotional states of those around them, leading to exhaustion and confusion about which feelings actually belong to them. With proper skill development, these same empaths can maintain their perceptive abilities while creating healthy separation. They notice emotional undercurrents without being swept away by them. Organizations increasingly recognize the value of emotionally skilled empaths in leadership positions. Research by the Center for Creative Leadership found that emotional intelligence, particularly the ability to accurately perceive and appropriately respond to others' emotions, correlates strongly with leadership effectiveness. Empaths who develop their natural sensitivity into structured skills often excel in roles requiring conflict resolution, team building, and navigating complex interpersonal dynamics. The journey from overwhelmed empath to emotionally skilled individual typically progresses through predictable stages. Initially, many empaths operate in survival mode, simply trying to manage their sensitivity through avoidance or emotional shutdown. With training, they move into a management phase, where they can function in challenging emotional environments using conscious coping strategies. The final transformation occurs when empaths reach mastery, where their sensitivity becomes so skillfully integrated that it functions as an enhancement in their life rather than a hindrance. The Emotional Empowerment Framework, EEF, Self-Awareness, the Foundation. The first component of the Emotional Empowerment Framework centers on developing acute awareness of your emotional landscape. For empaths, this means learning to distinguish between emotions that originate from within and those absorbed from external sources. This differentiation doesn't come naturally. It requires intentional practice and reflection. Begin with a daily emotional check-in practice. Set aside 5 to 10 minutes each morning to assess your baseline emotional state before interacting with others. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Where do I feel these emotions in my body? What thoughts accompany these feelings? Record your observations in a dedicated journal, noting patterns that emerge over time. This practice establishes a reference point that helps you identify when you're picking up others' emotions later in the day. Many empaths benefit from body-based awareness techniques. Our bodies often register emotional information before our conscious minds process it. Practice scanning your body regularly, noting sensations like tightness in your chest, a knotted stomach, or relaxed shoulders. These physical cues provide valuable data about your emotional state and help you recognize when you're absorbing external emotions, which often manifest as sudden physical changes without clear internal causes. Self-awareness also involves recognizing your emotional triggers and vulnerabilities. Perhaps certain personality types consistently drain your energy, or specific topics trigger an unusually intense emotional response. Mapping these patterns helps you prepare for challenging situations and implement protective strategies before becoming overwhelmed. Remember that awareness itself is therapeutic. Simply noticing, I'm taking on someone else's anxiety right now, creates space for conscious choice rather than automatic absorption. Skill development, the building blocks. The second component focuses on acquiring specific emotional management techniques tailored to empathic sensitivity. These skills build upon the foundation of self-awareness, providing concrete tools for navigating emotional complexity. Mindfulness practice forms a cornerstone of skill development for empaths. Regular meditation strengthens your ability to observe emotions without immediately reacting to them. Start with just 5 minutes daily, focusing on your breath and gently returning your attention whenever your mind wanders. Over time, this practice builds the mental muscles needed to maintain perspective during emotional flooding. Research from the University of Wisconsin-Madison shows that even 8 weeks of regular mindfulness practice creates measurable changes in the brain regions responsible for emotional regulation. Energy management techniques prove particularly valuable for empaths, who often experience emotional exchanges as energy transfers. Learn to recognize energy depletion signals like mental fogginess, physical fatigue, or emotional numbness. Develop a personalized energy restoration toolkit with practices that help you recharge, perhaps time in nature, creative expression, or brief periods of solitude. Implement these strategies proactively rather than waiting for complete exhaustion. Boundary setting skills require special attention for empaths, who often struggle with differentiating healthy connection from unhealthy absorption. Practice expressing your needs directly. I need to take a break from this conversation. Or, I can listen for 20 minutes, but then I need some time to process. Use visualization techniques like imagining a permeable bubble surrounding you that filters emotional energy, allowing connection without overwhelming saturation. The goal isn't emotional disconnection, but rather controlled engagement that protects your well-being. Communication strategies designed specifically for empaths help prevent emotional overwhelm during difficult conversations. Techniques like emotional bookmarking, briefly naming strong emotions as they arise during interactions, help maintain clarity and presence. For instance, silently noting, "I'm feeling defensive now," or "This is their frustration, not mine," prevents unconscious absorption while maintaining connection. Combined with regular breathing exercises during conversations, these approaches help empaths stay grounded while fully engaging with others. Advanced emotional regulation skills form the final component of skill development. These include cognitive reframing, shifting perspective on emotional triggers, compartmentalization, mentally containing emotional experiences within appropriate boundaries, and strategic disengagement, temporarily stepping back from overwhelming situations without completely disconnecting. Each skill requires practice in progressively challenging situations, gradually building emotional resilience. Application, integration into daily life. The third component of the framework focuses on implementing learned skills in real-world contexts. Without practical application, even the most sophisticated emotional management techniques remain theoretical rather than transformative. Begin by identifying specific situations where your empathic sensitivity typically creates challenges. Perhaps large social gatherings leave you drained, workplace conflicts trigger excessive emotional absorption, or family dynamics overwhelm your emotional boundaries. These scenarios become your practical training grounds for applying new skills. Start with moderately challenging situations before tackling the most difficult context, allowing yourself to build confidence gradually. Create implementation plans for high-stakes emotional situations. Before entering a potentially challenging environment, take a few minutes to set clear intentions. How will you maintain boundaries? What signs will indicate you need a brief break? Which specific techniques will you employ if you notice yourself absorbing others' emotions? This preparation activates your prefrontal cortex, the rational planning center of your brain, making it easier to access your skills when emotional intensity arises. Regular practice and everyday interactions strengthen your emotional management capabilities. Apply your techniques during routine conversations, noticing subtle emotional exchanges that previously went unexamined. When a coworker sighs heavily, practice observing their apparent frustration without automatically taking it on. When a family member expresses worry, acknowledge their concern while maintaining your emotional balance. These small, daily applications build the neural pathways that support emotional mastery. The framework operates cyclically rather than linearly. As you apply skills in real-world situations, you generate new self-awareness, which informs further skill development. For instance, you might realize during the application that certain techniques work better for you than others, or that specific emotional patterns require additional attention. This ongoing feedback loop creates continuous improvement over time. Tracking progress represents an essential aspect of the application. Many empaths discount their advancement because emotional management becomes increasingly automatic with practice. By documenting specific situations where you successfully applied your skills, perhaps navigating a tense meeting without absorbing the stress, or maintaining boundaries during an emotional conversation, you create tangible evidence of your growth. This documentation reinforces your confidence and motivates continued practice. The ultimate goal of the application is transformation, converting empathic sensitivity from a vulnerability into a strength. With consistent practice, emotional management skills become increasingly automatic, requiring less conscious effort over time. Your sensitivity remains intact, continuing to provide valuable emotional information, but without the overwhelm that previously accompanied it. This transformation allows you to access the gifts of empathic perception while maintaining personal well-being. The emotional empowerment framework transforms empathic sensitivity through systematic development of self-awareness, targeted skill acquisition, and real-world application, proving that emotional mastery isn't an innate gift, but a learnable path that converts sensitivity into strength. As we've seen throughout our exploration, the power to transform overwhelming empathic experiences into manageable, even advantageous abilities lies within your grasp. The journey of an empath isn't about passively accepting a predetermined sensitivity, but actively developing skills that allow you to thrive because of your unique perspective. You now understand that emotional management requires deliberate practice, not just innate talent. The myths we've dismantled open the door to genuine growth rather than frustration when you don't automatically excel at handling complex emotional landscapes. The mindfulness and regulation techniques we've explored aren't merely helpful suggestions, they're essential tools in your empath toolkit. By implementing these strategies consistently, you're not just coping, you're cultivating a relationship with your empathic nature that serves rather than drains you. Remember, your sensitivity isn't a weakness to overcome, but a strength to refine. The structured approach to emotional skill development we've discussed transforms what many consider a burden into one of your greatest assets, both personally and professionally. The EMPATH Mastery Method. This 6-step process will help you transform your empathic sensitivity from overwhelming to empowering through consistent, intentional practice. E. Examine the myths. Take 15 minutes to list 3 common misconceptions about empathic abilities that you've believed. Next to each, write a more accurate counter-statement. For example, replace, "I should naturally know how to handle others' emotions," with, "Managing emotional input is a skill I can develop with practice." Review these truths weekly until they become your default beliefs. M. Mindfulness routine. Dedicate 10 minutes daily to mindfulness practice. Choose one technique that resonates with you, perhaps a body scan, breath awareness, or guided meditation specifically designed for empaths. Set a consistent time, whether morning or evening, and create environmental cues, like a special cushion or gentle alarm that signal your practice time. P. Pinpoint your triggers. Keep a small notebook or digital note handy for 1 week to track emotional fluctuations. When you feel overwhelmed, note the situation, people present, physical sensations, and your immediate response. After 7 days, review your notes to identify patterns. Understanding what activates your empathic overload is crucial for developing targeted regulation strategies. A. Apply regulation techniques. Create 3 pocket-sized cards with different regulation strategies like the STOP method, grounding exercises, or energy shielding visualizations. Carry these with you and practice one technique daily, even when not overwhelmed, to build the neural pathways needed for automatic implementation during challenging moments. T. Trust-building communication. Schedule a 30-minute conversation with someone you trust once weekly to practice expressing your emotional experiences. Focus on using I statements and being specific about what you're feeling versus what you might be absorbing from others. This regular practice strengthens your ability to distinguish and communicate emotional boundaries. H. Harvest and adjust. Every Sunday evening, spend 15 minutes reflecting on your progress. Which techniques worked best? Where did you struggle? What one adjustment could you make to your practice in the coming week? Document these reflections in a dedicated journal to track your growth over time and celebrate your expanding emotional mastery. This process isn't meant to be completed once and forgotten. True mastery comes through cycles of practice, reflection, and refinement. Your empathic abilities are evolving skills, not fixed traits. The journey to emotional mastery as an empath requires patience and self-compassion. There will be days when implementing these techniques feels challenging. This is normal and expected. What matters most is your commitment to continued practice and growth. By approaching your empathic nature with these structured development strategies, you transform what once felt like an overwhelming burden into a profound gift, one that enriches your life and deepens your connections with others. Your sensitivity, when skillfully harnessed, becomes not just manageable, but truly advantageous. The path forward is clear. Continue developing these essential skills, practice with intention, and watch as your empathic abilities become one of your greatest sources of strength and wisdom. The energy exchange. Before we move into the next chapter on boundaries and authentic connection, let's take a breath together, a moment to pause and feel what has already shifted within you. You've just explored the heart of emotional mastery, learning that your sensitivity isn't a flaw to hide, but a form of intelligence waiting to be refined. That awareness alone changes everything. You've begun to witness your emotions rather than drown in them, and in doing so, you've taken one of the most transformative steps an empath can take. You may have noticed small but meaningful changes already. Perhaps you've started identifying when a feeling isn't yours, or you've caught yourself pausing before absorbing someone else's pain. These moments matter. Each conscious choice to stay grounded adds to your energetic strength. Growth in empathic awareness rarely announces itself loudly. It whispers through the quiet confidence that you can now feel deeply without being consumed. Now, I'd like to invite you to extend that awareness outward. Somewhere out there is another empath, perhaps sitting where you once sat, feeling overwhelmed, confused, and searching for clarity. Your reflections could be the very light that helps them begin their own journey toward empowerment. If this audiobook has offered you even one insight, one shift in how you see yourself, would you take a moment to leave an honest review of Empath Awakening? Think of it as an energetic exchange, a small ripple of gratitude that helps others find their way to peace and understanding. Your words don't have to be perfect or profound. Sincerity is enough. Each review becomes part of a collective healing field, a quiet network of souls learning how to feel deeply without losing themselves. By sharing your experience, you affirm the truth that empathy and empowerment can coexist. You help the next listener feel seen, validated, and supported before they even start listening. P.S. Every act of reflection strengthens your energy field. When you write from the heart, even in something as simple as a review, you reinforce your own healing while contributing to the healing of others. Thank you for being a part of this circle of awareness and compassion. Now, let's continue our journey into boundaries, the sacred architecture that allows your light to shine without burning out. Chapter 3. Boundaries for Better Connections. The Paradox of Protection. Why stronger boundaries create deeper connections. The moment you realize that saying no to others can be saying yes to yourself is transformative. For too long, many empaths have operated under a painful misconception that creating boundaries somehow diminishes their ability to connect deeply with others. This couldn't be further from the truth. In reality, boundaries are not walls, but doorways that allow you to choose when, how, and with whom you share your extraordinary empathic gifts. As empaths, we naturally absorb the emotions, energy, and needs of those around us. It's both our greatest strength and our most vulnerable challenge. Without clear boundaries, this sensitivity can quickly transform from a gift into a burden, leaving us emotionally depleted and disconnected from our own needs. You might recognize this feeling, the exhaustion after social gatherings, the overwhelming sense of responsibility for others' happiness. or the difficulty in distinguishing between your emotions and those you've absorbed from someone else. Establishing healthy boundaries isn't about shutting people out. It's about creating the emotional space you need to show up authentically in relationships. When you're constantly overwhelmed by others' emotions, how can you truly be present? How can you offer genuine support when you're emotionally drained? The truth is, boundaries don't limit connection. They make meaningful connection possible by preserving your emotional integrity and energy. Many empaths fear that setting boundaries will make them seem cold, distant, or uncaring. This fear often stems from past experiences where boundary setting was met with resistance or manipulation. Perhaps you've had someone accuse you of being selfish for prioritizing your needs. Or you felt guilty for not being available to everyone at all times. These experiences create a false dichotomy in our minds that we must choose between self-care and caring for others. In this chapter, we'll dismantle this harmful belief and show how boundaries and compassion work together rather than opposition. The foundation of authentic connection. Throughout this chapter, we'll explore 3 essential aspects of establishing empowering boundaries. First, we'll examine why boundaries are fundamental to your emotional well-being as an empath. You'll learn to recognize when your natural empathic abilities are serving you and when they're depleting you, and how to create protective practices that honor your sensitivity while preserving your energy. Second, we'll tackle the challenging but crucial skill of communicating your boundaries clearly and compassionately. Many empaths struggle with articulating their needs without feeling guilty or anxious about others' reactions. We'll explore practical language and techniques that allow you to express your limits while maintaining connection, because effective boundary communication is actually an act of honesty and respect in relationships, not a rejection. Finally, we'll take a look at real-life scenarios that demonstrate how healthy boundaries enhance rather than inhibit your relationships. You'll see examples of how setting clear expectations creates space for more authentic interactions, deeper trust, and genuine intimacy. When you're no longer enmeshed in others' emotional worlds, you can truly see and appreciate them for who they are, rather than as an extension of your empathic experience. The journey toward establishing healthy boundaries isn't always straightforward, especially for those of us with empathic gifts. There will be discomfort, resistance, both internal and external, and the need to practice these skills consistently. But I promise you this, on the other side of this work lies a freedom and authenticity in your connections that makes every challenging conversation worthwhile. When you protect your energy through conscious boundaries, you don't diminish your empathic abilities, but actually create the conditions for them to flourish in sustainable, life-giving ways. Are you ready to discover how boundaries can transform your experience as an empath? Let's begin. When emotions overflow. Sarah stood at the edge of the garden, watching the evening light drain from the sky. The marigolds glowed orange against the dark soil, bending in the slight breeze. She closed her eyes and breathed in the earthiness of late summer. Behind her, the screen door slapped shut. "Are you hiding out here again?" Michael's voice carried across the lawn. Not unkind, but heavy with something. Disappointment, perhaps? Sarah's shoulders tensed. She had come outside precisely to avoid the knot of emotions that had been building in the living room where their friends gathered. "Just getting some air," she said, not turning around. The truth was more complicated. In the last 2 hours since their dinner party began, she had absorbed Greg's anxiety about his job interview, Melissa's grief over her mother's illness, and the tense undercurrent between the newly engaged couple. It swirled inside her chest now, a burrowed storm she couldn't quiet. Michael stepped beside her, his hand hovering near her shoulder, but not touching. He understood her well enough to know when she needed space. "You know, you don't have to fix everyone's problems," he said. "I'm not trying to fix anything," Sarah said, though they both knew this wasn't entirely true. She picked a dead leaf from a marigold, rolling it between her fingers until it crumbled. I can't turn it off. Their feelings become my feelings. Then I'm drowning in emotions that aren't even mine." She thought of how she'd excused herself when Melissa had teared up talking about her mother's prognosis, how the lump in her throat had grown so tight she could barely breathe. Michael waited, giving her words space to settle. A cricket chirped nearby, its rhythm steady and uncomplicated. "Remember what Dr. Chen said about boundaries?" he finally asked. Sarah turned to look at him then, his face half shadowed in the fading light. "That they're not walls, but filters," she said. "But what if I put up boundaries and they think I don't care? What if I miss something important someone needs?" The question that haunted her: how to stay connected without being consumed. "You've been there for Melissa through every doctor's appointment," Michael said. "But when you disappeared to the bathroom for 15 minutes tonight, you weren't helping her. She noticed, asked if you were okay." Sarah felt her cheeks warm with shame. Her attempt to protect herself by withdrawing had only created more concern. "I don't know how to stay present without taking it all in," she admitted. From inside came the sound of laughter, bright and genuine. Life continued without her while she stood in self-imposed exile. Sarah thought of the breathing technique her therapist had taught her. Visualizing a membrane around her, permeable but protective, allowing her to feel compassion without merging with others' pain. She hadn't practiced it enough to trust it yet. "Maybe it's not about feeling less," Michael suggested, "but about knowing which feelings belong to you." He gestured toward the house. "They're your friends. They don't want a sponge for their emotions. They want Sarah." The night air cooled against her skin. Sarah looked toward the warm glow of their living room windows, where shadows moved in conversation and connection. She thought of the times she'd been most helpful to her friends, not when she'd taken on their burdens, but when she'd remained steady enough to offer perspective. Perhaps true empathy wasn't about erasing the line between herself and others, but seeing it clearly. How might her relationships transform if she approached them not as someone who must absorb every feeling, but as someone who could connect authentically because she remained distinct? The foundation of emotional integrity. For empaths, personal boundaries are not just helpful, they're essential. These invisible lines define where you end and others begin, creating crucial separation between your emotions and those of the people around you. Without clear boundaries, empaths often find themselves absorbing others' feelings as their own, leading to emotional exhaustion and a confused sense of self. Think of your emotional energy like water in a cup. Each person has their own cup. Without boundaries, your cup becomes connected to everyone else's through invisible straws. When someone feels sad, angry, or anxious, those emotions flow directly into your cup, filling it with emotions that aren't yours to carry. Eventually, your cup overflows, leaving you emotionally drained and unable to distinguish which feelings actually belong to you. Research in psychological resilience shows that empaths who maintain healthy boundaries report significantly lower rates of burnout and emotional fatigue. These boundaries serve as emotional filters, allowing you to remain compassionate and connected without becoming overwhelmed. They help you recognize when you're taking on too much and give you permission to step back when necessary. Many empaths resist setting boundaries out of fear that they'll appear selfish or uncaring. This couldn't be further from the truth. By establishing clear limits on what you can handle emotionally, you actually become more present and authentic in your relationships. You can listen deeply to others without becoming emotionally hijacked by their experiences. Boundaries also create space for self-awareness and personal growth. When you're not constantly processing others' emotions, you have the energy to explore your own needs, values, and desires. This self-knowledge is the foundation of emotional integrity, the ability to remain true to yourself while connecting with others. Creating and maintaining boundaries takes practice, especially for those naturally inclined to prioritize others' needs. Start small by identifying situations where you consistently feel drained or uncomfortable. These emotional reactions often signal boundary violations. Pay attention to physical sensations, too. Tension, fatigue, and anxiety can be your body's way of telling you that a boundary needs reinforcing. Establishing clear personal boundaries isn't about building walls. It's about creating doorways that you control, allowing you to connect deeply with others while maintaining your emotional well-being. Communicating boundaries with compassion. Communicating boundaries effectively requires a delicate balance between assertiveness and empathy. Many empaths struggle with this balance, fearing that expressing their needs will hurt others or damage relationships. However, clear communication is essential for establishing and maintaining healthy boundaries. The language you use when expressing boundaries significantly impacts how they're received. I statements focus on your experience rather than placing blame on others. For example, instead of saying, "You're overwhelming me with your problems," try, "I need some time to process when I hear about difficult situations." This approach communicates your needs without making others defensive. Picture boundary setting like adjusting the temperature on a shower. Too cold and you withdraw completely. Too hot and you get burned by overexposure. The goal is finding that comfortable middle ground, where connection feels good rather than painful or uncomfortable. Just as you would matter-of-factly adjust the water temperature without apologizing for not wanting to be scalded, you can calmly express your boundaries without feeling guilty. Timing and context matter when communicating boundaries. Choose a neutral moment, not during an argument or when emotions are running high, to express your needs. Begin conversations about boundaries when both you and the other person are calm and receptive. This increases the likelihood of being heard and understood. Consistency reinforces boundaries over time. If you establish a boundary but repeatedly allow it to be crossed without consequence, others will receive mixed messages about your limits. While flexibility is important in relationships, core boundaries deserve consistent protection. Remember that others learn how to treat you based on what you allow, so maintaining consistency helps train others to respect your boundaries. Nonverbal cues play a powerful role in boundary communication. Your body language, tone of voice, and facial expressions can either reinforce or undermine your verbal message. Practice speaking in a calm, firm voice while maintaining eye contact when setting boundaries. Avoid nervous laughter or apologetic tones that might suggest your needs are negotiable when they're not. When others resist or push back against your boundaries, it's important to stay grounded. Resistance often comes from those who benefited from your previous lack of boundaries. Rather than taking their reaction personally, recognize it as a natural part of changing relationship dynamics. Remind yourself that healthy relationships require mutual respect for each other's limits. For empaths who struggle with people-pleasing tendencies, rehearsing boundary statements can be enormously helpful. Practice saying phrases like, "I need to think about that before I commit," or "I'm not available for that right now," until they feel natural. Having these phrases ready reduces the likelihood of agreeing to things that compromise your well-being. Cultural and family backgrounds significantly influence how we view boundaries. If you grew up in an environment where personal boundaries weren't respected or acknowledged, setting them now may feel particularly challenging. Recognize that learning to establish healthy boundaries is a new skill that may feel uncomfortable at first, but becomes easier with practice. What might change in your relationships if you begin viewing clear boundaries not as barriers to connection, but as bridges to deeper, more authentic relationships? The relationship between boundaries and connection. Contrary to what many empaths fear, well-defined boundaries actually deepen connections rather than weaken them. When you clearly communicate your limits, you create space for more authentic and sustainable relationships. This paradox, that separation enables connection, lies at the heart of healthy relating for empaths. In relationships without clear boundaries, emotional enmeshment often occurs. This is when two people's emotional states become so intertwined that neither can function independently. While this might feel like closeness initially, it usually leads to codependency, resentment, and eventual disconnection. True intimacy requires two whole individuals choosing to share themselves, not two people blurring together until individual identities are lost. Consider the difference between two musical instruments playing together. When each instrument maintains its unique sound while harmonizing with the other, beautiful music emerges. If both instruments tried to produce exactly the same notes in the same way, the richness and depth would disappear. Similarly, relationships thrive on the distinct perspectives and energies that different individuals bring, which can only be maintained through healthy boundaries. Research in relationship psychology consistently shows that couples who respect each other's boundaries report higher relationship satisfaction and longevity. By honoring separateness, these partners create the safety necessary for vulnerability and deep connection. They understand that healthy relationships involve two independent people coming together by choice, not necessity or fear. The ICR Boundary Setting Model. The ICR Boundary Setting Model provides empaths with a structured approach to establishing and maintaining healthy boundaries. This three-phase process, identify, communicate, reinforce, creates a foundation for authentic connections without sacrificing emotional well-being. Phase 1. Identify. The first step in setting effective boundaries is identifying where they're needed. For empaths, this requires developing awareness of your emotional responses in various situations and relationships. Start by reflecting on interactions that consistently leave you feeling drained, anxious, or uncomfortable. These reactions often signal boundary violations. Creating a personal boundary map can be tremendously helpful in this phase. Take time to categorize your boundaries into physical, emotional, time and energy, and spiritual domains. For each category, identify specific limits that would support your well-being. For example, under emotional boundaries, you might write, "I need to limit exposure to violent media," or "I require 30 minutes alone after work to decompress." Pay particular attention to relationships where you notice yourself engaging in people-pleasing behaviors or abandoning your own needs. These patterns typically indicate areas where boundary setting is most needed, but also most challenging. Be compassionate with yourself during this discovery process. Many empaths have spent years prioritizing others' comfort over their own needs. The identify phase also involves distinguishing between negotiable and non-negotiable boundaries. Some limits are flexible and may shift, depending on context, while others represent core needs that need not be compromised. Being clear about this distinction helps you determine which boundaries require firmer enforcement and which allow for more flexibility. Phase 2. Communicate. Once you've identified your boundaries, the next step is communicating them clearly to others. Effective boundary communication is direct, specific, and delivered without apology or excessive justification. Remember that you have the right to set boundaries simply because they support your well-being. You don't need to prove they're reasonable to others. Using I statements helps frame boundaries in a way that expresses your needs without blaming others. For example, instead of "you always dump your problems on me," try "I need to limit emotional discussions to times when I have the capacity to listen fully." This approach reduces defensiveness and increases the likelihood that your boundary will be respected. Timing matters in boundary conversations. Choose moments when both you and the other person are calm and receptive, rather than during conflict. Begin these conversations by affirming the relationship. Then clearly state your boundary and the impact it will have. For example, "Our friendship is important to me. To be fully present when we're together, I need to limit our phone calls to 30 minutes. Active listening plays a crucial role in boundary communication. After expressing your needs, create space for the other person to share their perspective. This doesn't mean you should abandon your boundary if they resist, but understanding their viewpoint can help you navigate the conversation with empathy while remaining firm about your limits. Role-playing boundary conversations with a trusted friend or therapist can build confidence before having these discussions in real life. Practice maintaining a calm, clear tone even when faced with pushback, and develop responses to common objections. This preparation helps you stay grounded when emotions arise during actual boundary conversations. Phase 3. Reinforce. Setting boundaries is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process requiring consistent reinforcement. This final phase focuses on maintaining boundaries over time, addressing violations when they occur, and adjusting boundaries as needed to reflect your evolving needs. Regular self-check-ins help you monitor how well your boundaries are working. Schedule time periodically to reflect on questions like, "Are my boundaries being respected? Do I feel more energetically balanced? Have I been consistent in upholding my own boundaries? These reflections provide valuable feedback about areas that might need attention. When boundary violations occur, and they will, responding promptly and consistently reinforces your limits. A simple, calm restatement of the boundary is often sufficient. As I mentioned before, I need advance notice before you stop by my home. Avoid lengthy explanations or apologies, which can undermine the boundary's importance. Boundaries may need adjustment as relationships evolve and your own needs change. The ability to modify boundaries, making them firmer in some areas or more flexible in others, demonstrates healthy adaptability rather than rigidity. The goal is creating boundaries that protect your well-being while allowing authentic connection, not establishing inflexible rules that prevent growth or intimacy. The 3 phases of the ICR model work together as a dynamic system. Identification provides the foundation for effective communication, while reinforcement ensures that the boundaries you've communicated remain intact. As you move through these phases, you'll likely notice that setting boundaries becomes more natural and requires less conscious effort over time. Healthy boundaries serve as the foundation for authentic relationships, allowing empaths to remain true to themselves while deeply connecting with others. By identifying your needs, communicating them clearly, and consistently reinforcing your limits, you create relationships characterized by mutual respect and genuine intimacy, rather than enmeshment or depletion. Real-life boundary success stories. Consider Sarah, an empath who worked in a demanding healthcare environment. For years, she took on extra shifts when colleagues called in sick, answered work emails during her days off, and listened to coworkers' personal problems during lunch breaks. Eventually, she developed chronic fatigue and anxiety that affected her ability to perform her job effectively. Through implementing boundaries, Sarah began declining extra shifts except in true emergencies. She removed work email from her personal phone and established a lunch ritual of eating alone in a quiet courtyard twice weekly. Initially, some colleagues seemed surprised or even disappointed by these changes. However, within months, Sarah noticed something unexpected. Her relationships at work actually improved. With restored energy, she was more fully present during her shifts. Her colleagues came to respect her limits, and many even admired her self-care practices enough to adopt similar boundaries themselves. Boundaries function similarly to the banks of a river. Without defined edges, water spreads thin across the landscape, lacking the depth and force to flow meaningfully in any direction. But with clear banks containing it, the river gains depth and purpose. Like those riverbanks, boundaries don't restrict meaningful connection. They channel it, creating the necessary conditions for relationships to develop depth and significance. In family relationships, boundaries often face their most rigorous testing. Miguel, a naturally empathic parent, found himself emotionally depleted by trying to fix every problem his teenage children encountered. Recognizing this pattern, he began setting boundaries around when and how he would offer support. Rather than jumping in with solutions whenever his children expressed frustration, he started asking, "Would you like me to listen, or are you looking for advice?" This simple boundary created a transformative change in his family dynamics. His children began taking more responsibility for solving their own problems, while still feeling supported. More surprisingly, they started opening up about deeper issues, knowing their father wouldn't immediately try to take control of the situation. By limiting how he engaged, Michael paradoxically created space for a more meaningful connection with his children. Romantic relationships particularly benefit from clear boundaries. Jamie and Alex, both empathic individuals, initially prided themselves on being completely open with each other. They shared every thought, spent all their free time together, and even tried to mirror each other's interests. After 2 years, they noticed increasing irritability and distance in their relationship, despite their efforts to be close. Working with a therapist, they realized their lack of boundaries had created an unsustainable dynamic. They began establishing separate interests, spending time with their own friends, and respecting each other's needs for occasional solitude. Rather than diminishing their connection, these boundaries revitalized it. Their time together became more intentional and appreciative. By creating space for individual identity within the relationship, They discovered a deeper, more sustainable intimacy based on choice rather than obligation or habit. Professional boundaries also enhance rather than inhibit effective working relationships. Taylor, a consultant with strong empathic abilities, initially made herself available to clients at all hours. He answered calls during family dinners, responded to emails at midnight, and regularly exceeded the scope of projects without additional compensation. While clients appreciated his responsiveness initially, they began expecting this level of access and often took advantage of his willingness to go beyond contracted services. After establishing clear boundaries around his availability, working hours only, and project scope, requiring contract amendments for additional work, Taylor worried about client satisfaction. To his surprise, most clients respected these limits, and several specifically commented that his professionalism had increased their confidence in his services. By valuing his own time and expertise enough to protect it with boundaries, Taylor actually enhanced his professional relationships rather than damaging them. Boundaries create the necessary structure for authentic relationships to flourish. By identifying your emotional limits, communicating them clearly, and consistently reinforcing them when tested, you establish the foundation for connections characterized by mutual respect and genuine intimacy, rather than obligation or depletion. Boundaries transform our connections. As we've explored throughout this chapter, boundaries aren't walls that separate us from others. They're the framework that allows our most authentic connections to flourish. For empaths especially, these clear personal limits serve as the foundation for meaningful relationships rather than barriers to intimacy. You've now discovered that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's an essential act of self-care that preserves your emotional energy and honors your needs. When you protect your emotional space, you can show up more fully for those who matter most in your life. Rather than depleting yourself by absorbing everyone else's feelings, you create the conditions for sustainable, deep connection. The communication strategies we've examined provide practical ways to express your needs clearly while maintaining respect for others. Remember that firm doesn't mean harsh. By speaking your truth with compassion, you create safety not only for yourself, but for everyone in your relational sphere. The scenarios illustrating healthy boundaries demonstrate how this practice transforms relationships from draining to nourishing. Many empaths arrive at boundary work fearing that limits will diminish their natural gifts of sensitivity and intuition. What you may find instead is that boundaries actually enhance your empathic abilities by allowing you to consciously choose when and how to engage with others' emotional experiences rather than being constantly overwhelmed by them. As you continue implementing the practices from this chapter, notice how your relationships begin to shift. You may feel less resentment, more energy, and greater clarity about which connections truly serve your well-being. The people who respect your boundaries will often become your most treasured allies, while those who resist them reveal important information about the health of that relationship. Your journey toward balanced empathy doesn't end with setting boundaries. It begins there. In the next chapter, we'll build upon this foundation by exploring daily rituals and practices that further protect your sensitive nature while allowing your gifts to benefit both yourself and others. Trust that each small step toward honoring your limits creates ripples of positive change throughout your life. When you value yourself enough to establish healthy boundaries, you're not just healing your own experience, you're modeling for others what authentic connection truly looks like. Practice exercise. Before moving forward, take a moment to identify one boundary you'll commit to upholding this week. Write it down, along with how maintaining this boundary will support both your well-being and your ability to connect more genuinely with others. Return to this intention whenever you feel your resolve wavering, remembering that your emotional health matters. The path to empowered empathy isn't about diminishing your sensitivity. It's about channeling it wisely through the protective structure of clear boundaries. Your capacity for deep connection becomes sustainable when it flows through the healthy containers you create. Chapter 4: Building Resilience Through Gradual Exposure. From emotional overwhelm to resilient strength, the art of gradual exposure. The journey of an empath often feels like navigating through a sea of emotions, both your own and those of others around you. You've likely experienced those moments when a crowded room suddenly becomes too much, when a friend's grief feels physically painful in your own body, or when the collective anxiety of your workplace drains your energy before noon. These experiences aren't imaginary or signs of weakness. They're real manifestations of your empathic nature. As we near the conclusion of our journey together through this audiobook, we've explored the foundations of understanding your empathic gifts, established crucial energetic boundaries, and developed daily rituals for self-protection. Now we're ready to address perhaps the most transformative aspect of empath empowerment: building resilience through gradual exposure. This chapter serves as the bridge between protection and strength, teaching you not just to shield yourself, but to thrive amid the emotional currents that once overwhelmed you. Think of emotional resilience as a muscle that strengthens with proper training. Just as you wouldn't expect to lift heavy weights without gradually building your physical strength, you can't expect to handle intense emotional environments without progressive practice. The key insight we'll explore is that controlled, incremental exposure to emotional stimuli, paired with the right management tools, creates lasting resilience without the burnout that comes from pushing too hard, too fast. Many empaths fall into one of two problematic patterns: complete avoidance of emotional intensity, which limits life experiences, or throwing themselves into overwhelming situations, which leads to exhaustion and retreat. Both approaches ultimately fail because they don't allow for the gradual building of capacity. In this chapter, we'll chart a middle path, one that honors your sensitivity while expanding your capabilities through intentional practice. We'll first outline a step-by-step approach to gradually exposing yourself to emotionally charged environments, starting with situations that feel manageable and slowly increasing intensity as your confidence grows. This isn't about forcing yourself into discomfort, but rather about mindful expansion of your comfort zone at a pace that feels right for you. You'll learn to recognize the subtle signs of your emotional limits before they become overwhelming, allowing you to practice right at the edge of growth. Next, we'll explore the grounding exercises and awareness techniques that serve as your toolkit during these practice sessions. These aren't just emergency measures for when things get difficult. They're skills to be practiced regularly so they're second nature when you need them most. From breathing techniques and physical grounding practices to cognitive reframing strategies, you'll develop a personalized set of resources that support your unique empathic profile. Finally, we'll address how to evaluate your progress and adapt your approach over time. Resilience building isn't linear. You'll have breakthroughs and setbacks along the way. We'll discuss how to track your emotional capacity, celebrate your growth, and compassionately adjust when you encounter challenges. This ongoing process of self-assessment ensures that your practice remains effective and sustainable for the long term. By the end of this chapter, you'll understand that your sensitivity isn't something to overcome. It's a gift to be strengthened through practice. The gradual exposure approach honors the truth that lasting change comes not from forcing transformation, but from patient, consistent effort. As we move through these final teachings together, you'll discover that the very environments and emotions that once drained you can become the training ground for your most resilient self. When too much becomes unbearable. Sarah sat at the corner table of the cafe, her fingers wrapped around a ceramic mug that had cooled 20 minutes ago. The crowd had grown since noon, and with each new person who entered, a fresh wave of emotion crashed against her. She felt the anxiety of the businessman checking his watch, the heartbreak of the young woman who kept looking at her phone, the frustration of the barista who had been on shift since 6. Each feeling piled onto her own until her chest tightened and her breathing shortened. "You need to try the grounding technique Dr. Michaels suggested," she told herself. 5 things you can see: the steam rising from the espresso machine, a child's red backpack, a sparrow on the windowsill, the barista's tattoo, the chipped blue paint on the doorframe. 4 things she could touch: the cool ceramic between her palms, the wooden chair beneath her, the cotton of her shirt against her skin, the small river stone in her pocket, her talisman. 3 things she could hear: the hiss of the milk steamer, laughter from a corner table, a car horn outside. 2 things she could smell: coffee beans, someone's cinnamon perfume. 1 thing she could taste: the lingering bitterness of her Americano. The tightness in her chest loosened. She took a deep breath and returned to the book on her table. Managing Emotional Boundaries, a guide for empaths. Dr. Michaels had given it to her 3 weeks ago, after their 4th session. Read it, but more importantly, practice it, he had said, his eyes kind but firm. The world won't change for you, Sarah. You need to build your resilience one exposure at a time. Outside the window, the October sun cast long shadows across the street. Sarah watched a woman pause to help an elderly man who had dropped his groceries. She could feel their gratitude, their kindness, like warm honey in her chest. These moments balanced the scales. She turned the page and read about systematic desensitization, how small, controlled exposures to emotional stimuli could build tolerance over time. She thought of how last month she couldn't even sit in this cafe for 10 minutes, how the crush of emotions would send her fleeing to the quiet of her apartment. Today, she had made it 45 minutes. Progress came in small victories, measured in minutes and breaths, and the ability to stay when every instinct screamed to run. She felt the businessman's relief as he finally received his call and watched the young woman's face brighten as someone joined her table. Sarah remained seated, letting the emotions flow around her rather than through her. The river stone felt warm now in her palm. Perhaps tomorrow she would try the farmer's market, just for 15 minutes. Perhaps with enough practice, she could one day attend her sister's wedding without needing to hide in the bathroom every half hour. What would it feel like to move through the world without being crippled by the weight of everyone else's hearts? The path of incremental exposure. Building resilience as an empath isn't about diving headfirst into emotional tsunamis. It requires a thoughtful, deliberate approach, one step at a time. The gradual exposure method allows you to build your emotional muscles progressively, just as you wouldn't attempt to lift 300 pounds on your first day at the gym. Think of your sensitivity as a powerful instrument that needs proper calibration. A violin in the hands of a beginner produces screeching sounds that hurt the ears. But with practice and gradual exposure to increasingly complex pieces, it creates beautiful music. Your empathic abilities follow a similar principle. They need careful tuning through strategic exposure. The first step in effective incremental exposure is honest self-assessment. Take time to identify your current baseline. How much emotional input can you handle comfortably? What situations consistently trigger overwhelm? Keep a small notebook or use your phone to document instances when you feel emotionally flooded. Note the setting, people present, your physical sensations, and intensity level on a scale of 1 to 10. This creates a personalized map of your emotional terrain. With this map in hand, you can now create a hierarchy of emotional exposures. Start with situations rated 2 to 3 on your personal intensity scale. Perhaps a brief coffee with a friend who tends to be emotionally expressive, or 10 minutes at a small gathering before taking a break. Success at this level builds confidence and provides valuable practice for your coping tools. The key to this process is consistently paired with self-compassion. Schedule regular, planned exposures with gradually increasing duration or intensity. Perhaps you begin with weekly visits to a small bookstore, then progress to a busier cafe, and eventually work your way up to a crowded mall, but only when you feel truly ready for each new level. Rest and recovery periods are not optional luxuries. They're essential components of the incremental exposure approach. After each emotional exposure session, plan a minimum of twice the exposure time for recovery. This might involve solitude, nature immersion, creative expression, or whatever replenishes your energy. Without adequate recovery, resilience building becomes counterproductive. As you progress, document your successes, no matter how small. Did you stay 5 minutes longer at a social gathering than last time? Successfully navigate a difficult conversation without absorbing the other person's emotions. These victories build your confidence and provide evidence of your growing resilience. The incremental approach also involves developing an exit strategy for each situation. Before entering any potentially overwhelming environment, identify where you can go for a quick break, whom you can text for support, and how you'll excuse yourself if necessary. Having these safety nets in place allows you to push your boundaries while maintaining a sense of control. Perhaps the most crucial element of this process is patience. Building resilience isn't a weekend workshop. It's a gradual rewiring of your nervous system's response to emotional stimuli. Some weeks you'll make noticeable progress. Others might feel like backsliding. Both are normal parts of the process. The trajectory matters more than any individual day's experience. True resilience comes not from avoiding emotional intensity, but from gradually building your capacity to engage with it on your own terms. Anchoring in the storm, grounding techniques for empaths. When emotional waves threaten to carry you away, grounding techniques serve as your anchor to the present moment. These practical tools interrupt the cycle of absorption and overwhelm by redirecting your attention to physical sensations and immediate surroundings. The effectiveness of grounding lies in its simplicity. These techniques require no special equipment and can be practiced discreetly in almost any setting. The 5-4-3-2-1 sensory technique stands as a powerful first-line defense against emotional flooding. When you feel overwhelm building, pause and identify 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. The methodical inventory of your senses pulls your awareness away from emotional absorption and back into your physical body and immediate environment. Have you ever noticed how children naturally know when they need to move their bodies? They instinctively understand what neuroscience now confirms. Physical movement effectively discharges emotional energy. As an empath, incorporating deliberate movement into your grounding practice can work wonders in high-stress situations. Try firmly pressing your feet to the floor and imagining roots growing down into the earth. Push your palms against a wall or doorframe for 5 seconds. Then release. These simple movements provide immediate sensory feedback that can interrupt the cycle of emotional absorption. Water carries remarkable grounding properties for most empaths. Like a lightning rod directing electricity safely into the ground, water helps channel and neutralize excess emotional energy you've absorbed. In moments of overwhelm, something as simple as washing your hands with cool water while focusing on the sensation can create immediate relief. For deeper grounding, visualize the water carrying away the emotions that don't belong to you, returning them to the universal energy field where they can be transformed. The breath serves as your most portable and powerful grounding tool. When emotions feel overwhelming, shift to box breathing. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, exhale for 4 counts, and hold the exhale for 4 counts. Repeat this pattern for at least 2 minutes. This regulated breathing pattern activates your parasympathetic nervous system, your body's built-in calming mechanism, and creates a physiological state incompatible with panic or emotional flooding. Mindful awareness differs from general mindfulness in its specific application to emotional states. Rather than trying to empty your mind, mindful awareness involves becoming a curious observer of your emotional experience. When you feel intense emotions in a challenging environment, mentally step back and notice, I'm experiencing sadness right now, or there's anxiety present. This slight shift from I am sad to I am experiencing sadness creates crucial space between you and the emotion. Practice this distinction daily, and you'll develop the ability to witness emotions without being consumed by them. Object anchoring provides a tactile grounding method particularly effective in social situations. Carry a small object in your pocket, perhaps a smooth stone, a metal paperclip, or a textured coin. When emotional overwhelm begins, touch this object and focus completely on its physical properties. Temperature, texture, weight, shape. This simple action interrupts the absorption process and returns your awareness to the physical realm. Some empaths find it helpful to mentally assign a specific intention to their grounding object. Silently recalling, I am safe, or I am separate from others' emotions while touching it. For deeper resilience in high-stress situations, practice the containment visualization daily. Imagine your energy field as a luminous egg or bubbles surrounding your body. This boundary is selectively permeable, allowing love and positive energy to flow freely while filtering out energies that don't serve your well-being. Take 5 minutes each morning to strengthen this visualization, and then briefly recall it before entering emotionally charged environments. With practice, you'll find you can reinforce this energetic boundary in seconds, even in the midst of challenging situations. The power of these techniques lies not in their individual application, but in their strategic combination. Create your personalized sequence of grounding methods, moving from quick techniques like the 5-4-3-2-1 method to deeper practices like the containment visualization as needed. With regular practice, this sequence becomes second nature, allowing you to maintain your center even as emotional intensities rise around you. Remember that grounding and mindful awareness are skills that strengthen with practice. The neural pathways that support these abilities go stronger each time you employ them, much like building muscle through regular exercise. The key difference is consistency rather than intensity. 5 minutes of daily practice builds more resilience than an occasional hour-long session. What if your sensitivity, rather than being a vulnerability to overcome, is actually your greatest strength when paired with these powerful grounding techniques? Tracking your resilience journey. Measuring progress in emotional resilience requires different metrics than most growth processes. Unlike physical fitness, where you might count repetitions or track weight loss, resilience development often appears in subtle shifts, moments when you respond differently to familiar triggers or recover more quickly from emotional saturation. Creating a systematic approach to tracking these changes provides valuable feedback on your resilience-building efforts. The most effective evaluation begins with establishing clear baselines. Before implementing new strategies, document your current experience with emotional stimuli. How long can you comfortably remain in a crowded environment? How quickly do you recover after an emotionally intense conversation? Which situations reliably trigger overwhelm? These initial measurements provide comparison points for future assessment and help you recognize progress that might otherwise go unnoticed. Your body serves as a sophisticated feedback mechanism throughout this process. Many empaths experience physical sensations, tension headaches, digestive issues, and sudden fatigue when approaching their emotional capacity limits. By tracking these physical responses alongside your exposure practices, you create an early warning system. Over time, you'll likely notice these physical signals becoming less intense or occurring at higher thresholds of emotional exposure, providing concrete evidence of your growing resilience. Think of resilience building like tending a garden. A gardener doesn't pull on seedlings to make them grow faster. They create optimal conditions, provide consistent care, and trust the natural process. Similarly, your evaluation should focus on whether you're creating the right conditions for resilience growth, not just on outcomes. Are you practicing grounding techniques consistently, gradually increasing exposure duration, allowing adequate recovery time? Sometimes the most important progress happens underground, in the root system, before visible growth appears. The ARES framework, Adaptive Resilience Integration for Empathic Sensitivity. The ARES framework offers a comprehensive approach to building emotional resilience while honoring your empathic nature. This systematic method transforms overwhelming sensitivity into a managed strength through a continuous cycle of development. Awareness. The foundation of resilience begins with heightened self-awareness. This initial phase involves mapping your emotional landscape through careful observation and documentation. Start by identifying your specific triggers. What environments, interactions, or circumstances consistently lead to emotional saturation? Notice patterns, perhaps crowded shopping centers overwhelm you within 30 minutes, while one-on-one conversations with emotionally expressive friends become challenging after an hour. Equally important is recognizing your unique warning signals. These might include physical sensations like tightness in your chest, cognitive signs like racing thoughts, or emotional indicators like sudden irritability. By documenting these early warning signs in a dedicated journal or digital note, You create a personalized early detection system. The awareness phase also involves an honest assessment of your current resilience baseline. How quickly do you recover from emotional exposure? What coping mechanisms do you currently employ, and how effective are they? This clear-eyed inventory provides the starting point for your resilience development journey and helps you set realistic expectations for progress. Response selection. Once awareness is established, the framework moves to developing a diverse toolkit of responses tailored to different situations and intensity levels. This phase focuses on matching specific techniques to your unique needs and preferences. Begin by exploring various grounding methods through experimentation. Try the 5-4-3-2-1 sensory technique in one overwhelming situation, physical boundary reinforcement in another, and breath work in a third. Note which methods provide the quickest relief in different contexts. Next, develop a hierarchical response plan, a graduated series of interventions organized from simplest to most intensive. For mild overwhelm, perhaps a few deep breaths suffice. For moderate intensity, you might need the full 5-4-3-2-1 technique. Severe overwhelm might require temporary environmental withdrawal combined with extended grounding practices. This phase emphasizes customization rather than universal solutions. The most effective response toolkit reflects your personal preferences, cultural background, and specific sensitivity patterns. Some empaths find water-based grounding techniques most effective, while others respond better to earth element practices like barefoot walking or gardening. Integration. The integration phase transforms theoretical knowledge and occasional practice into embodied skill through systematic implementation. Here, planned exposure combines with consistent application of your response strategies to build neural pathways that support resilience. Begin with controlled practice sessions in low-stakes environments. Before entering a moderately challenging situation, perhaps a brief visit to a busy cafe. Review your response plan and set clear intentions for which techniques you'll employ. During the exposure, consciously implement your selected methods at the first sign of emotional saturation. Gradually increase duration and intensity of exposures as your comfort grows. This might mean extending your time in moderately challenging environments before attempting more emotionally dense situations. The key is incremental progression, pushing boundaries slightly while maintaining a foundation of success. Integration also involves creating implementation triggers, specific cues that automatically activate your response strategies. For example, you might train yourself to initiate box breathing whenever you enter a crowded elevator, or to check in with your body's sensations hourly during social gatherings. These automatic associations bypass the need for conscious decision-making during overwhelm. Evaluation. The evaluation phase provides crucial feedback for refining your approach. Without systematic assessment, progress can go unrecognized, and ineffective strategies might persist unnecessarily. Implement regular reflection periods, perhaps weekly journaling sessions where you review recent exposures, response effectiveness, and perceived changes in your resilience capacity. Look for patterns across situations. Which environments consistently remain challenging? Which techniques reliably provide relief? Track observable metrics to quantify your progress. This might include recovery time after emotional exposure, duration of comfortable engagement in previously challenging settings, or frequency of overwhelm episodes. While subjective experience matters, these concrete measurements often reveal progress you might otherwise miss. The evaluation phase also involves celebration of successes, regardless of size. Acknowledging when you successfully navigated a previously overwhelming situation reinforces neural pathways associated with resilience and builds motivation for continued practice. Synthesis. The final phase of the ARIES framework involves integrating lessons from your evaluation into a refined approach. This continuous improvement cycle ensures your resilience-building efforts evolve alongside your changing needs and growing capacities. Based on evaluation findings, adjust your exposure plans. Perhaps certain environments require a more gradual progression, or maybe you're ready to accelerate exposure in areas where you've shown substantial resilience growth. Refine your response toolkit by emphasizing techniques that consistently prove effective, while modifying or replacing those with limited benefit. This might mean developing variations of successful strategies to address different contexts or intensity levels. The synthesis phase also involves expanding your understanding through continued learning. As your practice deepens, explore more nuanced techniques or specialized approaches for particularly challenging situations. This might include advanced energy management practices, specialized protocols for professional settings, or techniques from various cultural traditions. The beauty of this framework lies in its cyclical nature. After synthesis, you return to heightened awareness with new insights, beginning the cycle again at a more advanced level. This iterative process allows for continuous development without an endpoint, honoring the understanding that resilience building represents an ongoing journey rather than a destination. Building resilience through gradual exposure isn't simply about developing tolerance for difficult environments. It's about transforming your relationship with your empathic nature, creating a sustainable approach to navigating emotional landscapes, and ultimately accessing the profound gifts that sensitivity offers when properly managed. Continuous refinement, the art of adaptation. As your resilience grows, the need for evaluation evolves into an ongoing conversation with your empathic nature. The most advanced practitioners develop what might be called dynamic resilience, the ability to fluidly adjust their boundaries and practices in real time as conditions change. This level of mastery requires regular refinement of your approach based on both successes and setbacks. Resilience isn't about becoming impervious to emotional impact, writes Dr. Elena Herdekaroff, founder of Empath Empowerment. It's about developing the confidence that you can handle whatever comes your way, not because you're bulletproof, but because you've built reliable systems for managing your sensitivity. Consider implementing a monthly resilience review practice. Set aside 30 minutes at the end of each month to assess your progress using these questions. What new environments can I now navigate with reasonable comfort? Where am I still experiencing consistent overwhelm? Have I noticed any shifts in my physical or emotional responses to challenging situations? Which techniques have I relied on most heavily? And which deserve more exploration? This regular check-in prevents you from outgrowing your approach or missing important feedback. Remember that resilience building isn't a linear process. You might experience periods of significant growth, followed by temporary setbacks, perhaps during times of physical illness, sleep deprivation, or major life transitions. These fluctuations don't represent failure, but rather normal variations in your capacity. The mark of true resilience is not the absence of difficulty, but your relationship with it. The ability to recognize capacity changes without judgment and adjust your approach accordingly. The integration of incremental exposure, grounding techniques, and ongoing evaluation creates a powerful system for transforming empathic sensitivity from a potential liability into one of your greatest strengths. The emotional resilience ascent, your progressive pathway forward. Building emotional resilience isn't about leaping directly into overwhelming situations. It's about taking deliberate steps that gradually expand your capacity. The systematic approach we've explored allows you to transform sensitivity from a vulnerability into a strength through measured, intentional practice. By beginning with your personal emotional inventory and progressively challenging yourself through controlled exposure, you create the ideal conditions for growth without burnout. This methodical approach honors both your sensitivity and your need for self-protection, while creating space for development. Remember that each small victory, whether it's staying grounded for 5 extra minutes in a crowded store or maintaining your center during a difficult conversation, represents meaningful progress. These incremental wins compound over time, building the neural pathways and emotional muscles that support lasting resilience. The grounding techniques and mindfulness practices we've examined aren't merely coping mechanisms. They're transformative tools that reshape how you process emotional information. Through consistent application, what once felt overwhelming becomes manageable, and what seemed impossible becomes achievable. Most importantly, the self-assessment framework gives you ownership of your journey. By regularly evaluating your responses and adjusting your approach, you become the author of your emotional evolution rather than a passive recipient of others' energies. The Resilience Expansion Spiral, your 30-day challenge. Goal: to systematically increase your emotional resilience in progressively challenging environments while maintaining well-being and avoiding overwhelm. 1. Chart your emotional landscape, days 1 through 3. Create your personal exposure hierarchy, rating situations from 1 to 10 based on emotional intensity. Be specific about contexts, people, and durations that affect your comfort. Time investment, 30 minutes daily. 2. Select your starting point, day 4. Choose a level 2 or 3 situation from your hierarchy, challenging enough to stimulate growth, but not overwhelming. Time investment, 15 minutes. 3. Prepare your resilience toolkit, days 5 through 7. Practice at least 3 grounding techniques daily until they become second nature. Rehearse these in calm settings before applying them in challenging situations. Time investment, 10 to 15 minutes twice daily. 4. Schedule your first exposure session, day 8. Plan a brief, 10 to 15 minutes engagement with your chosen scenario. Set clear boundaries about duration and have an exit strategy. Time investment, 20 minutes planning, 15 minutes execution. 5. Implement mindful awareness during exposure, day of session. During your session, maintain dual awareness, observing your emotions while staying present. Notice physical sensations without judgment. Time investment, duration of exposure. 6. Process and record, immediately after exposure. Document your experience, noting emotional responses, physical sensations, and the effectiveness of coping strategies. Time investment, 15 minutes. 7. Rest and recalibrate, 1 to 2 days after exposure. Allow integration time between sessions. Practice extra self-care after challenging exposures. Time investment, whatever you need. 8. Gradually extend duration, weeks 2 through 3. Once comfortable at your current level, increase exposure time by 5 to 10 minutes before advancing to more challenging situations. Time investment, increasing with comfort. 9. Climb your hierarchy, weeks 3 through 4. Move to the next intensity level when 3 consecutive exposures at your current level feel manageable. Progress at your own pace. 10. Celebrate and reflect, day 30. Review your journal to recognize patterns, progress, and insights. Acknowledge growth with meaningful recognition. Time investment, 30 minutes. This spiral isn't rigid, adapted to your unique needs and circumstances. Some steps may require more time, while others might flow naturally. Trust your intuition while maintaining the progressive structure that prevents overwhelm. Throughout this audiobook, we've journeyed from understanding the empath's gift to establishing healthy boundaries, developing intuitive discernment, and now building lasting resilience. These elements work together as an integrated system for emotional well-being. Your sensitivity remains your superpower. Rather than diminishing your empathic abilities, the practices in this audiobook enhance them by creating a foundation of stability from which your intuition can flourish. The boundary work from earlier chapters protects your energy, while the intuitive practices help you discern which emotions truly deserve your attention. Now, with resilience training, you can engage more deeply with the world without losing yourself in the process. The path from emotional exhaustion to empowered self-mastery isn't linear. It spirals upward with each cycle of practice, reflection, and growth. As you continue implementing these tools, you'll find yourself naturally shifting from merely surviving as an empath to thriving because of your empathic nature. Your journey doesn't end here. Each day brings new opportunities to refine your practice and deepen your resilience. Trust in your ability to navigate the emotional landscape with increasing skill and confidence. The world needs your empathic gifts, and now you have the foundation to share them sustainably. From a place of strength, clarity, and inner peace. Final words. As we reach the end of our journey together, I want you to take a moment to acknowledge how far you've come. The path of an empath is not an easy one to walk, yet here you are, learning, growing, and transforming your sensitivity into your greatest strength. When we first began this exploration, perhaps you felt overwhelmed by the constant barrage of emotions that weren't your own. The world seemed too loud, too demanding, too draining. But now, armed with the tools and practices we've covered together, You stand at a different vantage point. You've discovered that your empathic nature isn't a burden to bear, but a profound gift to nurture. The practices we've explored, from establishing energetic boundaries to developing intuitive discernment, from grounding rituals to emotional cleansing techniques, have all served a singular purpose: to help you thrive as an empath in a world that often doesn't understand your sensitivity. These aren't just theoretical concepts, but practical lifelines designed to support your daily experience as someone who feels deeply. Remember the boundary-setting exercises that helped you differentiate between your emotions and those of others? Or the intuition-building practices that sharpened your inner guidance system? These tools now belong to you, ready to be called upon whenever you need them. Your empathic toolkit is no longer empty. It's robust, personalized, and ever-evolving. What I hope you take away most from our time together is that you are not alone in your experience. The challenges you face are shared by many others who perceive the world with the same depth and intensity. Your sensitivity doesn't make you fragile. It makes you extraordinarily perceptive and compassionate in ways that enrich not only your life, but the lives of everyone you touch. Of course, this audiobook doesn't claim to have all the answers. The journey of an empath is deeply personal, and what works beautifully for one may need adaptation for another. I encourage you to continue exploring, questioning, and refining these practices to suit your unique sensitivities and circumstances. There's always more to learn about the fascinating intersection of empathy, energy, and human connection, areas that science and spirituality are only beginning to fully understand. As for what comes next, that's beautifully up to you. Perhaps you'll dive deeper into specific aspects of empathic development that resonated strongly with you. Maybe you'll share these insights with other sensitive souls in your life who could benefit from them. Or perhaps you'll simply continue to practice, day by day, the art of being both open-hearted and self-protected, a balance that empaths continuously refine. Whatever path you choose, I invite you to approach it with gentle curiosity and self-compassion. Progress isn't always linear, especially when it comes to emotional and energetic work. There will be days when you feel completely in command of your empathetic abilities, and others when old patterns of absorption and overwhelm resurface. This isn't failure. It's simply part of being human, of learning and relearning lessons as we spiral upward in our growth. In the quiet moments when you feel your sensitivity might be too much to bear, return to the foundations we built together. Ground yourself, breathe, set your boundaries, trust your intuition. And remember that your capacity to feel deeply is also your capacity to love deeply, to understand profoundly, and to connect authentically, gifts our world desperately needs. You've always had the power to transform your empathic nature from a source of depletion into a wellspring of wisdom. Now you have the roadmap too. Use it well, adapt it often, and never forget that your sensitivity is not just something to manage. It's something to honor. As this audiobook concludes, and you continue writing your own story, carry this truth with you. The world doesn't need you to dim your light to make others comfortable. It needs you to shine brightly, boundaries intact, wisdom flowing, empathy extended. Not from depletion, but from abundance. Your empathic journey doesn't end here. In many ways, it's just beginning. The most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. These persons have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep loving concern. Beautiful people do not just happen. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
We appreciate you tuning in to one of our captivating audiobooks. For more immersive experiences, here is another audiobook we're certain you'll enjoy. Don't forget to show your support by liking this video, sharing what you loved about this audiobook in the comments section below, and subscribing for more captivating audiobooks like this. Thanks for being a part of our audiobook community.